personally speaking, how would you describe Dr. Einhorn? What kind of fellow is he, and what characteristics does he bring to the work that he does and the patients that he treats that kind of sets him apart in your eyes?
The word that describes Dr. Einhorn to me, of course there are lots of words: compassionate, diligent, hardworking, brilliant, inspiring. But I think underneath all this is this restless relentlessness. It's never being comfortable with something you've done. It's always the pursuit of the next achievement. And it's not for personal reasons. It's really for humanitarian reasons. It's really just, it's a core human value that Dr. Einhorn espouses. And he really sets the standard, and we need that. We are all driven by our imperfections. And Dr. Einhorn certainly has his imperfections as well. I'm sure Claudette, his wife, would list those out for you quite well. But, you know, we seek to have role models. We want to know that there's a gold standard out there, that there's a model to follow, to inspire you. And Dr. Einhorn serves that for many in the medical community. And I'm always struck by the relationships that he has with patients and with nurses and with physicians, both locally and internationally, the respect that he is held with. Dr. Einhorn routinely has physicians from all over the world come and work with him. Even to this day, we have several international physicians working with us. We have physicians from other programs throughout the country. There are people who come to do their fellowship training here to this day specifically to work with Dr. Einhorn. Dr. Einhorn answers questions directly from patients all over the world. A patient from Uruguay, or a patient from Spain, or a patient from France will find out about Dr. Einhorn. They will email him directly. They will tell them their story. And Dr. Einhorn will answer every question, usually within a couple hours of receiving the email, because he is obsessive with looking at emails and being responsive. If you call him for advice, he'll call you right back. It's not that he's too busy. He's not too busy for you. He's not too busy for his patients. And he really is a role model, and I try as much as I can to look to his example as something that I should be doing. And I hope I've incorporated some of that into my practice and hopefully into the humanity that I also show my patients.
Wonderful. How would you, and you have touched on this several times before, but how would you describe Dr. Einhorn's kind of place in medical history?
I think if we look broadly at medical history, cancer is at the very top of the list as a frightening scourge, frightening scourge.
Can we just
Yeah.
start that?
Yeah. I think if we think about medical history, I would put cancer at the top of the list of feared diseases, of diseases that can strike people at any time of their life, can cause a great amount of suffering. And certainly there are other medical conditions. There are horrifying infectious diseases and other debilitating cardiac and neurologic and pulmonary conditions. But I certainly would say that cancer is still the number one most feared diagnosis that one has in their lives. And so within the context of cancer, I would say that Dr. Einhorn is one of the most influential thinkers in the history of cancer discovery. I would certainly put him on my Mount Rushmore of oncologists in the history of medicine. He would be too modest to say that. And he would be the first to tell you that the cure of testicular cancer and the management of treatment of other cancers is a collaborative effort. It's a result of scientists that are working in their laboratories. Most of them are anonymous to the rest of the public. It's due to international efforts. It's due to discoveries, both big and small, that come together. And he'll be the first to tell you that. And all of that is true. But Dr. Einhorn is a champion of all that, and he's certainly, I think, the face of all of those efforts that have taken place. So I would put Dr. Einhorn on my Mount Rushmore, certainly for cancer discovery. And if you place cancer in the context of in the context in all of medicine of one of the most feared conditions, I think it would be the Mount Rushmore of all of medicine.
Excellent. All right. Tell me about looking to the future for the treatment of testicular cancer. What things might be on the horizon, or what types of technologies might play a role in the future? Or maybe not just testicular cancer, but generally.
That's a very broad question generally. I can narrow it down a bit to testicular cancer. So it is true that most men today who are diagnosed with testicular cancer can be told that they will not die from testicular cancer and that they will live a long and healthy life. Having said that, there still are some groups of men who die of testicular cancer, and we owe it to them and future generations to come up with the better treatments and the cures for that group of patients as well. And worldwide, that still numbers into the tens of thousands. So there are still men, unfortunately, about 400 a year in the United States. But this is a disease that still strikes men all over the world. So there still are men dying of testicular cancer, and we're still looking for those new discoveries. And we work every day at that, and we're testing new ideas and novel therapies. To this day, we continue to do that. There are men who appear to be cured of their testicular cancer but relapse decades later. This is so-called late relapse. And the biology of their disease is quite different. It's an uncommon occurrence, but it can be a devastating one. So understanding that biology and coming up with better treatments for them, it continues to be one of our efforts. There are a group of men who have very advanced disease when they're first diagnosed, and they aren't necessarily cured the first time around with chemo, and they require high doses of chemo as a second-line treatment to cure them. So we're looking at newer approaches to treating them in the first-line setting so that they don't relapse to require the high-dose chemotherapy in the second-line setting. There's also a rare diagnosis. There are about 400 or 500 men a year who have a germ cell tumor that does not originate in the testicle, but originates in the mid-chest. You might be familiar with the story of Brian Piccolo. So Brian Piccolo was a running back for the Chicago Bears in the late 1960s. And there was a movie made. James Caan played the part of Brian Piccolo. Billy D. Williams played the part of Gale Sayers. And Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo became friends. They were both running backs on the Chicago Bears. And it was very unusual in that day to have friends of different races who would room together and be as close as they were. But they had a very special relationship. Brian Piccolo had one of these rare tumors of the mediastinum. And as anybody who has seen the movie Brian Song knows, Brian Piccolo died from that. Unfortunately, even though it's rare, 400 or 500 patients a year, half of those patients do die from that disease. So we continue to study that. The other thing that Dr.
Can we, on the other thing,